Yo, what's going on, YouTube, and welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy Kevin Forte. So today we are back to take a look at the Tampa Bay Lightning as we continue our season preview videos here for the 2024-25 NHL season. If you guys like these videos, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. So let's get right into the really kind of really a shifting of the culture for the Tampa Bay Lightning. And I mean, really, the big move, obviously, let's just get right into it because that's what we're talking about with Tampa here. So, Steven Stamkos, the captain, the number one overall pick of this team, heads out. He heads out to Nashville. And apparently, there was some discussion whether his contract was fair, whether that was going to be the right deal for him, for the team. So, I got to be honest with you, Tampa lowballed him. He didn't want to sign for that money. He ends up going to Nashville. Who do they bring in, though? They bring in Jake Guentzel. So Jake Guentzel has had a little bit of a career. He's been bouncing around since the trade deadline. He was with the Carolina Hurricanes, the most recent team he was with. Obviously, before that, he has spent pretty much the majority of his career developing and becoming an NHL player with the Pittsburgh Penguins. So he has stayed on the East Coast in the Eastern Conference. He'll be continuing that with the Tampa Bay Lightning. So looking at the lineup change, we might as well start with that top line. We've got Jake Guentzel, Brayden Point, and Nikita Kucherov. Not going to lie, that's pretty lethal. That's a deadly top line. Tampa should be pretty excited for that. I think there's always going to be that bitter taste with Guentzel, though, because they're going to think, well, that's Stamkos, right? That's Stamkos' spot. So Jake Guentzel has high expectations coming in. He signed a big contract. Obviously, the guy he's basically replacing in Stamkos, those are big shoes to fill. I think Guentzel can do it. I think long term, that contract will be worth it for Guentzel compared to Stamkos. It's the way things went. I think a lot of Tampa fans, it's a rough way to start for Jake Guentzel, and he did nothing wrong. So then we get to the second line. Couple of changes here. So Hagel and Cirelli alongside Cam Atkinson coming in. So Cam Atkinson's kind of a weird one. He'll be jumping into the top six for the Tampa Bay Lightning. There's a big opportunity for him. He spent the majority of his career with the Columbus Blue Jackets, and he's been bouncing around a little bit since then. So Cam Atkinson, he's a veteran. He's been around the game. This is a guy they're hoping can contribute maybe 30 to 40, maybe even 50 points this season on a really cheap deal. That's really what Tampa's, that's the Tampa Bay Lightning model right now, is making the most out of guys on really low contracts, and that's kind of where they're at with a guy like Atkinson, and he's chasing a cup at this point too, so it makes a lot of sense for all parties involved there. Obviously Hagel and Cirelli, we're used to those guys being third line guys in Tampa. They're going to get more of an opportunity on the second line. I don't think it's that big of a deal. Cirelli's a really good player, and same thing for Hagel, but it's just we're used to a different level of depth in Tampa Bay. So this is a little bit different than what we've seen. Connor Sheary, Nick Paul, and Michael Isamont are going to make up the third line. That's pretty much the same as what we saw last year. Those guys were in some form in the bottom six. Zemgus Girgensons, Luke Glendening, and Mitchell Chaffee are going to make up the fourth line. So Luke Glendening and Zemgus Girgensons, they've been around the league. You're seeing a theme here. There's either the really young guys like Chaffee or Isamont, and then you've got the older guys like Glendening, Girgensons, Atkinson, right? You have a little blend of the young guys on entry-level contracts and then the older guys chasing a cup where they're trying to get 40 to 50 points out of guys making $1 million for this season. So Tampa definitely has an idea. They have the model. It's just a matter of if the puzzles are going to kind of match up and meet together. And that's really what this season's going to be about for Tampa. And, that kind of continues on the defense because there are a couple of pretty big changes to this blue line. Obviously, the biggest guy leaving this team is Mikhail Sergachev. Obviously, he had that freak accident against the Rangers last year. That ended up being one of the last games he played with the Bolts. He came back late in the playoffs last year. Ultimately, it was all for naught. He ends up leaving the team. And that was kind of one of the main reasons Tampa traded him, is they are kind of concerned about his future in terms of his health after that injury. So they decide to part ways with Sergachev, so now you've got Hedman and Darren Radish as your top defensive pair. Definitely different than what we've seen from Tampa recently. Ryan McDonough comes back. He'll be playing alongside an old friend in Eric Chernak on that second pair. I think that's a good second pair for Tampa. No real concerns there. Those guys are going to come back. Again, it's different now that McDonough is obviously older, but they're going to try and bring something back from the past. Sometimes that works. Sometimes it doesn't. JJ Moser and Nick Perbix. This is the wild card pair because JJ Moser, I think, is going to be really a surprise to most Tampa Bay Lightning fans. And that's a guy they picked up in the Sergachev trade, and I think he's going to be a pretty important asset for this team moving forward. It sounds crazy, but I think he could eventually take over McDonough as that second pairing defenseman. I don't know if JJ Moser's a top pair guy. I don't think he's going to be replacing Hedman anytime soon on this roster. But at some point in the future, he could be that next core defenseman in the top four for the Tampa Bay Lightning. Nick Perbix had a bit of a rough season last year, right? So they're hoping to see a little bit more from him. He had flashes of really good stuff, but I think for Tampa fans, the expectation is a lot. And they're expecting a lot from Perbix going into this season. Goaltending is going to look pretty much the same, especially having Vasi between the pipes. Jonas Johansson will be backing him up, but let's be honest, the spotlight's going to be on Vasilevsky once again in 2024-2025. So with that out of the way, let's take a look at the key points for this team. So obviously the big key point is Gensel coming in. That's a huge addition to this team that they're hoping is going to add a lot of offense to this team. And considering the whole scenario with Stamkos, his injury history, his lack of production over the last couple years in terms of, it's not even his lack of production over the last couple years. Tampa Bay, you have to look at this purely from, in the next 5 years of basically both those contracts, who is going to be the more reliable player in the next 5 years. And the Lightning decided that they are going to go after Gensel. They see more future and more for their buck out of Gensel over the next 5 years than what they would probably see from Stamkos. And the reality is that's probably a pretty good bet. Considering Stamkos is now on the other side of 30, he's going to be going the opposite direction in age. And for Gensel, he's still in the prime of his career for the next 5 years. And as much as that's a difficult PR and identity situation for Tampa, it does make a lot of sense. And at the moment, and including me, I was not happy with that move and the way they went about it, but I do understand the move, and I think in 5 years, that deal is probably going to make a lot more sense to most people. Obviously, the other big one that could, might end up not being that big of a deal or could end up blowing up in their face, losing Sergachev. Sergachev going out on that blue line puts a massive hole on that right side and puts Darren Radish in a real tough situation. Now, if Victor Hedman, maybe it just clicks, and those guys, it doesn't really matter who's playing alongside Hedman. But that's a big spot for Darren Radish coming in to fill a void of a guy like Sergachev. And like I said, JJ Moser was a part of that deal. I think Tampa fans are really going to like him. And don't forget, they also got, it's either Connor or Morgan Geekie in that deal. I think it's Connor Geekie from the former Coyotes, now the Utah Hockey Club. He's also a part of that deal. He's going to end up being a player in Tampa Bay in the next couple years, and that's a top 10 draft pick of the Yotes back in the day. So Tampa has things to look forward to in that deal. It's just not going to transpire this season. And that's really what Tampa did this summer. They're looking at, we're not just going for it now, right? The Stamkos for Gensel thing, they're looking at the next 5 years if that deal is worth it. Same thing for this deal with Sergachev, right? We're worried about winning now, but we also want to make sure we're taking care of our futures as well. And that's kind of what they did here. And that's why, even with all that said, I think Tampa's going to have an incredible season. They're going to make the playoffs. I have them in a wild card spot, though, but I have the Tampa Bay finishing with 100 points next season, just barely beating out teams like the Islanders, the Sabres, the Red Wings, the Senators, teams like that. So yeah, it'll be a downgraded season for Tampa, but by no means, I would say 100 points is probably being conservative. I could see them even doing better than that. And I think there's just enough of that core still on this team that is good. And again, there is also the possibility that they fall off this year. That is a possibility. I wouldn't be surprised if one of those teams we talk about, like Boston, Toronto, or Tampa, one of those three teams ends up falling out of the playoffs completely, and we see one of those new teams in the Atlantic jump in. Tampa could be that team. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. I'd love to know what you think of Tampa. I want to know the barometer on Tampa this year because I think a lot of people seem to be thinking they're going to make the playoffs, but there is definitely that little bit of a cloud building up over the head of Tampa Bay fans. Pun intended there. Is this the year that Lightning stop striking in Tampa and they miss the playoffs? Who knows? And once you fall into that rabbit hole, ask Red Wing fans. Once you miss the playoffs after consecutively making it year after year, it is quite hard to get back into the playoffs. And you could find yourself what could be a 1-year drought, could end up becoming a 10, 15-year playoff drought I don't want to scare Tampa fans, but you never know. So let me know what you think down below. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.